Resident Evil Requiem tries to do a lot. It wants to wrap up Leon S. Kennedy's journey that started all the way back at the RPD in Resident Evil 2, while simultaneously introducing a brand new character, Grace Ashcroft, an FBI analyst who gets thrown into what I can only describe as some of the most insane sequences that Resident Evil has ever tried to depict. It's also the first game in the series where it genuinely feels like they want to go deeper. Deeper with its characters, deeper with its lore, deeper with its themes. It wants to be a finale. It also wants to be a brand new beginning for the series. But ambition that big can often be dangerous. Crippling, even. This game is about the duality of control. Grace's complete lack of control, her unease, her fear, her panic as she desperately tries to stay alive. Leon's total control, completely at ease whilst shooting, roundhouse kicking and sawing zombies in half. The game wants you to be scared, then it wants you to be fearless. It's a balance that few games have ever dared to manage, and Requiem not only tries, it dives headfirst into it, for better and for worse, essentially offering you two games for the price of one. Inside the Chronic Care Center, you navigate a multi-layered nightmare, doors locked behind keycards, puzzles stacked on puzzles, two separate stalker-type enemies hunting you, zombies that sing, zombies that clean, zombies that retain memories of the person they no longer are. Then the game expands even further. Now you're traversing entire streets, buildings and rooftops of a forgotten Raccoon City as Leon. You find the most intense nostalgia inside the remnants of the RPD, a massive underground umbrella facility that will take your breath away with its sheer scale and photorealism. And before I forget, the return of not only the Lickers, but Mr. X. Yeah man, this game does a lot. I wasn't kidding, because there is more. Much more. Some of it works beautifully, some of it only works the first time you experience it, and some of it does not work at all. So in this video, we're going to investigate all of it and answer one question. Did Resident Evil Requiem try to do too much?
Oh, sorry.
This is where your journey begins, in the rain-soaked streets of Renwood, a city not far from the ruins of Raccoon City. You're looking for the Renwood Hotel, the place your investigation into the multiple dead bodies found across the United States takes you. And what an opening it is. The streets are busy, people are off to work. A train rushes over your head as rain covers every inch of the world in front of you. It is very linear, sure, you can't walk into the road or enter any of the stores, but damn it if it isn't a vibe. This is gonna sound weird, but the game absolutely nails the wet look. Cardboard boxes look damp, neon signage flickers through the wet exteriors of windows, the pavement realistically reflects headlights in distorted streaks of light. It's dark, not because it's night, but because the clouds sit heavy above you. You walk through the narrow back alleys where rain trickles through steel grates and broken panels overhead, soaking through every crevice, dripping on the trash, filling up puddles. It might seem like I'm spending a lot of time describing very granular detail, but that is exactly what makes Grace's sections of the game so unique. It's all built on the intimacy of your interactions with its world. Slow, creeping tension, very much akin to what you would find in something like Resident Evil 7. The game wants you to, for a lack of a better word, soak up the atmosphere. Shit yourself when the guttural sound of lightning hits your headphones, and its bright flash blasts through the windows, briefly illuminating the dark interior of the Renwood Hotel. Now, the opening to the game serves two purposes. It sets the tone for what you can expect while playing as Grace, but it also sets up the story. This now abandoned hotel is tied to Grace in a much more intimate way than purely her investigation. 8 years ago, her mother, Alyssa Ashcroft, was murdered here. In a flashback, we're shown the night of her death, and it conveys so much in a very short span of time. It really manages to sell Grace's fear as a child, desperately trying to keep up with her mom as they attempt to escape the building.
Stay close. Mom, wait!
Wait. Come on, keep moving.
There's something so gripping in how it's all showcased. Alyssa is always just ahead of you, turning a corner before you, constantly stopping to call for you to keep up. It captures that feeling of being fearfully small, needing an adult to guide you through something you do not understand. Grace loses her mother that night, but she never loses the fear of still being a child. She very justifiably still suffers from anxiety. It's a core part of who she is. It explains why she has an office analyst job instead of ever working in the field. She's introverted, timid, she struggles with confrontation. Grace to me is one of the best new characters Resident Evil has introduced in years, and I genuinely think it comes down to the powerful performance. The way she stutters in fear.
What do I do?
The way she conveys pain, melancholy and uncertainty, sometimes all in a single scene. It's nothing short of brilliant.
Is anyone there?
It also feels fresh. Resident Evil is known for very bold female characters, but Grace presents something new for the series. She's not fearless, she's not hyper-competent, and personally, I found it very easy to connect with her. And because of that, I also found it very easy to fear with her.
I'll be fine. I hope.
The Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Center might go down as one of the best designed locations in all of Resident Evil. It's here within this brilliant mix between hospital and Dracula-esque castle that the majority of Grace's survival horror gameplay loop happens. Her scared nature directly influences how she plays. She's slower, she moves with intention, she's almost forced to never take anything head on because it would probably end with a very gory death animation. Her gameplay not only matches her as a character but constantly echoes who she is. An office analyst experiencing one of the worst fucking field days known to man. You're trying to escape Rhodes Hill by finding 3 cubes locked in 3 safes spread through the various halls of the care center. For Grace, resource management becomes everything. Your tight inventory space constantly forces trade-offs, leaving valuables in the safe room chest or throwing them away altogether just to make space for a keycard or puzzle item you know you'll need for later. Grace exemplifies that classic Resident Evil survival horror loop of needing an item, finding that item, using that item. The game's not really changing the formula so much as it's doubling down on what already makes that loop so great, within a building that really lets those elements shine. Rhodes Hill is multi-layered, beautiful yet terrifying, warm in one wing, cold and clinical in another. It's the kind of location you could spend hours learning, and thankfully, for a large portion of this game, you get to. But it's not only the building you get to learn, it's also its inhabitants. The weird and wonderful cast of zombies that roam the halls of Rhodes Hill. There's one that flicks off the light switch when things get too bright, a kitchen chef still chopping up his last meal, a chairman busy, well, firing his last employee, I guess.
You're fired.
There's a zombie that constantly sings, apparently suffering from main character syndrome. A patient zombie with bandages wrapped around his head, clearly still reliving the pain of whatever operation was performed on him. And then my personal favorite, the maid, still cleaning, frantically trying to remove all the blood on the walls. It gets even worse when you notice the shards of glass stuck in her face, presumably from desperately cleaning cracked mirrors and smashing into them in fits of uncontrollable rage. These zombies stand out as true residents of Rhodes Hill and really make this space come to life. The distant memories of their lives bleeding through their undead state is disturbing, but it's also strangely quaint. After a while, I almost formed a bit of a bond with them. Now don't get me wrong, they are absolutely terrifying, but I sometimes found myself just watching them from a distance, almost feeling sad for them in a strange sense. Now the game heavily incentivizes you to strategically clear the holes of some of them by using an item called a hemolytic injector. It becomes necessary because if left for too long, some of them will eventually turn into blister heads, a variant of zombie far more aggressive and much harder to take down. And this is where the exploration really comes into play. You need to explore Rhodes Hill from top to bottom if you want to survive. You find coins that can be used to purchase upgrades for your storage or health from a vending machine found within the building. You also explore to find buckets or pools of blood scattered throughout Rhodes Hill. which you use to craft these potent injectors. When used on a zombie, they essentially pop them like a balloon. It's gross and visually quite stunning. In fact, everything about this game is visually stunning. Documents scattered across desks, jars filled with strange abnormalities floating in murky liquid, the most beautiful interiors lit with purposely placed lighting that guides your eye through each room. There's even a roulette table that you can spin for some reason. The gore has incredible detail too. Faces half destroyed, still twitching, eyes dangling from sockets. The game is brutal, but in a very enjoyable way. And that's also why I genuinely believe you'd be doing yourself a massive disservice not playing Grace's sections the way the developers clearly intended, in first person. The only real advantage of third person is a few extra animations. When Grace runs, for example, she can realistically fall to the ground from sheer panic. It's pretty cool and it is something that's fun to play around with on a second or third run, but it does sacrifice immersion. And for the first run, I think that immersion is crucial, especially when you come face to face with the two stalkers that roam Rhodes Hill. The girl, which you've seen in basically all the marketing, and my personal favorite, Chunk. A massively overgrown monstrosity that chases you with relentless force despite barely fitting through the hallways of the building. The physics alone are insane to watch. The way Chunk's body realistically contorts as he squeezes through tight corridors. The way he's just stuck and then suddenly gains ground after forcing himself through a narrow hallway. I also love the way he reaches through doorways trying to grab you, his massive arms clawing at the room while the rest of his body struggles to force its way through. It is disgusting, but I also couldn't look away, and I think that is exactly what makes Rhodes Hill so effective as a location. The more you explore it, the deeper the rabbit hole goes. It's the tragedy of what happened here long before you ever arrived that truly makes Rhodes Hill stand out. Rhodes Hill is full of sad stories, test subjects, failed experiments, children used as lab rats, like Marie. I don't know how many people picked up on the fact that the ugly hag chasing you relentlessly through the dark, the one that burns in the light, yeah, she was just a child, much like Emily, the other girl you find locked in a cell. Just another experiment gone wrong, like so many others in this horrible place. And beneath Rhodes Hill, it gets even worse. You eventually discover prison cells, and a processing facility where the bodies of failed experiments are dumped into a massive meat grinder. In arguably one of the grossest sequences in the game, you're forced to fight for your life while watching bodies get dragged into the machine and violently torn apart. Okay, now look, I'm not gonna lie. From a gameplay perspective, it's actually a lot of fun. Pushing these zombies into the grinder while desperately trying to avoid it yourself is chaotic in the best way possible. I really hope that doesn't make me sound like a complete psycho. My point is, the things that happened here are grotesque. And while the building itself is beautiful to explore, the deeper you look into its history, the more disturbing it becomes. It's a place that leaves you with a very uneasy conscience, and honestly that is why I kinda love it. Not many locations manage to combine incredible level design with such a dark and tragic backstory. It's also why I think Requiem will ultimately be defined by its storytelling. And whether you agree with every narrative decision or not, there is a very clear effort here to tell something meaningful, to give its locations, its characters, and even its monsters a sense of tragedy, to really make you think about Umbrella's lasting impact. And in many ways, that commitment to story is one of this game's greatest accomplishments. But that same commitment also introduces one of Requiem's biggest problems. Let me put it this way. I have never had the urge to immediately replay a Resident Evil game quite like I did with Requiem. The moment the credits rolled, I began my insanity run. But I can also acknowledge that part of that urge came from wanting to experience the highs of that first playthrough again. And those highs, man, they are higher than perhaps any Resident Evil game I've ever played. Highs that are unfortunately either diminished or completely absent on a second or third run. And that is actually quite unusual for the series. Most Resident Evil games thrive on replays. Once you understand the layout of the locations, learn the puzzle solutions, and start optimizing your routes, a whole new layer of appreciation opens up. You start noticing the elegance of the level design, the clever ways the game allows you to master combat spaces that once overwhelmed you. You unlock new gear that you genuinely want to test out in subsequent playthroughs. Requiem is a little different. Many of its most incredible sequences are designed to hit incredibly hard the first time you experience them, but to pull off those moments, the game relies heavily on scripted sequences, which means a surprisingly large portion of the game ends up being extremely linear, and that really hurts the replay value. Take something small like the first time Mr. X shows up. On that first playthrough, it is an incredible moment. My jaw was on the floor, I was having the time of my life running away from him. But on a second and third run, you realize how scripted that encounter really is. Much like Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 Remake, he appears exactly when the game needs him to, on the exact cues he's supposed to. He's not dynamic in the way that Resident Evil 2 Remake's Mr. X was. He does not realistically patrol the RPD or track you through different rooms. My point being that the encounter is 100% a story moment rather than a gameplay moment, and Requiem is filled with moments like this, where the story takes precedence over the gameplay. Now that is a bit of a double-edged sword, and I'm still deciding where exactly I land on it. On the one hand, it absolutely hurts the replayability, but on the other hand, it also enables one of the best first playthroughs of any Resident Evil game. From Leon riding a bike up a collapsing building to fighting a hunk in the Umbrella facility, this game is insane. But all those big moments are nothing compared to how well they handle some of the more intimate ones. The intense focus on story allows the game to deliver cutscenes with real emotional weight and true stakes. The first time Leon and Grace meet, having only mere seconds to exchange dialogue before a barrier separates them, is filled with so much tension as they talk past each other. It's acted incredibly and directed expertly.
What does Victor want with you?
What?
Grace.
What do you mean?
He grabbed you for a reason.
Wait, you're DSO. That's the counter bioterrorism agency, right?
Take this.
You sure?
You might need it. Now go. Get out of here.
It's also the first Resident Evil game where a long-running character gets a truly satisfying, complete arc. For the first time, we get to see Leon come to grips with everything that happened to him in Raccoon City, with some of the most emotionally gripping cutscenes I think we've ever seen in this series. There's a genuine sense of catharsis in Requiem that I honestly don't think would be possible without the game leaning more heavily into these linear story moments. But that same philosophy also extends into some of Grace's sections, where in my opinion, the gameplay problem is a lot worse. Several of her horror sequences are extremely linear. The worst offender though is the orphanage flashback. Once you know where the hiding spots are, when those creepy kids will appear, and where the scripted triggers are placed for them to always fall right in front of you, those sections begin to feel less like something you want to experience again, and more like an obstacle you have to get through just to reach the fun parts of the game. Honestly, a simple chapter select would solve a lot of my personal gripes. Because these moments are not bad in and of themselves, in fact they're incredibly well crafted from a narrative point of view. The problem is having to replay them every single time while knowing that no matter what you do, you're not really influencing how the sequence plays out. But that push and pull is also kind of the entire point of Requiem. Two protagonists sharing one story, two narratives slowly converging into one, two completely different playstyles. Honestly, it's a lot for any game to try and juggle. So I want to be very clear about something. This critique about replayability actually comes from a place of pure admiration. Because when I first heard that Requiem would be doing a dual campaign, I genuinely did not think it was gonna work. But I was wrong. The way these two campaigns bounce off each other creates some of the best pacing. Just as Grace's sections begin to push the tension to its absolute limits, the game shifts perspective. And no matter how many times I will inevitably replay this game, there's one part that will never lose its magic. Every single time you get to play as Leon S. Kennedy. Yeah man, this is Leon S. Kennedy exactly as advertised.
Excuse me.
Cool, confident, and crucially, with nothing left to lose. Story-wise, Leon is dying. He is suffering from an infection known as the Raccoon City syndrome, a strain of the T-virus that manifests in people who survived the original Raccoon City outbreak. Which means Leon is investigating the same bodies Grace was sent to analyze. But when Victor kidnaps Grace, Leon suddenly becomes entangled in something much bigger, the search for Elpis. I love this opening because much like Grace's introduction, Leon's opening immediately establishes what his sections are going to be about. If Grace represents survival horror, Leon represents one thing: carnage. Leon is brutally efficient in this game. Years of combat experience combined with the knowledge that he may not have much time left to live creates a playable protagonist who is more aggressive than he has ever been before. From his trusty new hatchet, capable of decapitating zombies with laser-like precision, to the Requiem, a weapon that quite literally blows holes into enemies the size of Saturn. Leon is constantly in these zombies' faces, with some of the coolest kill animations in the entire series. You cannot help but feel like the biggest badass alive while playing as Old Man Kennedy. And just a special shout out to the developer who designed all the reload animations, because they somehow made reloading a shotgun look like a work of art. This opening also sets the tone for Leon's story sections as well. Once again, same word, carnage. The outbreak caused by Victor spreading through a rain-soaked Renwood is an incredible sequence to witness. Zombies flooding the streets, chaos erupting everywhere, civilians screaming for help, and I love the small details here. If you actually stop to help some of these civilians, they will literally thank you before running away.
Shit.
Much like this opening, almost every section of Leon's campaign is energetic, bombastic, and just downright fun to play. For roughly the first half of the game, this is largely Grace's story. Leon appears more like a release valve, a moment between the terror where the game hands you a breather and basically says, go have some fun, we'll scare you in a minute. But in the final stretch of the game, the balance completely shifts. Now it becomes Leon's show. From a pacing standpoint, it's brilliant. Both characters get their moment to shine. Grace gets Rhodes Hill, Leon gets an entire Raccoon City. Okay, maybe that is a bit of an exaggeration, but this is probably the closest we'll ever get to an open world Resident Evil game. Massive buildings, draw distances stretching for miles, zombies roaming the streets, zombies in the sewers, zombies on the rooftops. The game basically lets you take a nostalgia trip through the streets of memory, the remnants of Raccoon City, in the aftermath of a nuclear blast. Muted in color but still beautiful. The sun hitting the streets just right. It feels like melancholy turned into a city. By this point, the game also fully embraces its action spectacle. You unlock new weapons through a chest system using points earned from killing enemies, zombies, blisterheads, anything that moves. If Leon sees it, Leon kills it. You have access to snipers, shotguns, you can even impale enemies with objects. It's basically Resident Evil 4 Remake Leon, but on steroids and probably a couple of anti-inflammatories for Leon's older bones. Now I can already see the arguments that some people will make here, that by moving into these larger action sections, you lose some of that personality and attention to detail that made Rhodes Hill and the zombies that roam there so memorable. And yeah, I don't really have a fancy counter-argument to that, except to say this. Sometimes it's really fun to just shoot down nameless zombies by the dozen without thinking too hard whether he used to be a kitchen chef or not. I loved this section, and it somehow gets even better. You walk up those flights of stairs, you hear distant melodies of a familiar song, and you already know what you're about to see. The RPD in all its fallen glory. Opening those doors and seeing the statue, the old typewriter where we used to save our game, now dusty and no longer working. Walking through those same hallways where we once spent hours learning every corner just to evade Mr. X. The library, the STARS office, the bones of the officer killed by a licker who Leon found on his first time around, still unmoved. It genuinely feels like stepping back into a place you know by heart. Leon standing at Marvin's desk and paying his respects, it just honestly hit me right in the feels.
Hey, Lieutenant Brenna. Kennedy. Reporting for duty.
Because this game is ultimately Leon's story returning to where it all began. And part of the joy here is just simply running around the RPD and comparing what you remember with what is left. In many ways, Leon's final chapters almost feel like a mirror of Resident Evil 2 Remake. Not just in locations like the RPD, but even in the way that events unfold. You face Mr. X again, you fight Lickers again, you explore an underground Umbrella laboratory again. But the difference this time is Leon. He's no longer that rookie cop. He's not struggling to survive anymore. And one of my favorite little gameplay details that reinforces that progression is that Leon can now parry that same slash attack from Mr. X that used to completely annihilate rookie cop Leon. I love it when story and gameplay intersect like that. There's something incredibly cathartic about watching Leon confront the same demons that used to haunt him for so long and overcome them with relative ease. But Requiem is not just interested in Leon confronting the past, because while Leon is finally making peace with what happened in Raccoon City, the story is already moving towards something much bigger. Leon and Grace are entangled in the search for Elpis, all in pursuit of a single question, one that apparently only Grace can answer. This is the question that the game builds towards slowly throughout your entire journey. What does the creator desire? The answer that will ultimately unlock Elpis. So what is Elpis? Well, for most of the game, nobody actually knows, not even the villains. There are thousands of theories floating around. Some believe it's a bioweapon capable of controlling minds. Others think it's something powerful enough to reshape the world entirely. But the truth is much simpler. No one actually knows what Elpis is, because it's locked behind a password that only Grace can unlock. Now, throughout the game, we're led to believe that there is something inherently special about Grace. After all, Oswald Spencer himself said she was the key. Spencer was the creator of Elpis and the original mastermind behind Umbrella. We learn a lot through an interview Spencer gave to Grace's mother, Alyssa Ashcroft, an interview that ultimately cost her her life. On the night she was murdered, she hid the recording of that interview behind a painting in the Wrenwood Hotel. Years later, Grace finds it, and in the tape, Spencer says something incredibly important.
Is that one of your subjects?
Of course not. She was alone in the world. I took her in to make amends.
Is she
Perfectly normal. Just an average child needing a home. She is my hope.
She is my hope. At first, that feels like confirmation that Grace must be special in some way. That's certainly how Victor Gideon took it. That maybe her blood contained something unique. That maybe she was engineered. But the game pulls a clever bait and switch. Grace is not special, not genetically, not biologically. She's simply a girl that Spencer adopted near the end of his life. Because after decades of destruction, Spencer finally began to regret what he had done, what he had created. So he created Elpis as a final attempt to undo the damage caused by the virus. And Grace? Grace was his hope for redemption, a chance to nurture life instead of destroying it. So when the time finally comes to unlock Elpis, the answer to the password becomes obvious.
Please know that you are my hope.
She is my hope. A blind hope.
Okay.
Elpis is revealed to be the ultimate antiviral. Zeno and Gideon were wrong. Elpis was never a weapon, and thankfully it ends up saving Leon's life. Now look, there's a lot of nuance that I'm just basically skipping over to get to the point. The clones of Grace, the involvement of different factions like the connections from Resident Evil 7, there's a lot going on in the final act, but also in the entire story. It's honestly a little difficult to fully unpack in one video, but fundamentally, the entire plot is built around a bait and switch, which is probably why it also ends up feeling a little convoluted by the end. What I can say though is that I ultimately ended up liking it, but I also think only time will tell how this whole convoluted plot ages over time. I think Requiem will ultimately be defined by just how much it tries to jam into its 12-hour runtime. It's a game that goes by incredibly fast because of how well paced it is, but at the same time, it's also a game that I feel might age a little more poorly than some of the other Resident Evil titles. especially when it comes down to its more linear sequences, and one of the other bigger letdowns of the game, the boss fights. It's something I deliberately chose not to mention earlier because, to be fair, there really aren't many of them, and especially not many new ones. Instead, a game so heavily built on nostalgia ends up retreading the same steps reusing boss fights we've seen multiple times before. Mr. X returns, and while the fight is fun, it's also mostly the same. The fight with Hunk is cool, but it definitely doesn't reach the same heights as something like the Krauser duel in Resident Evil 4 Remake. And the final boss, it's honestly a bit of a joke. A retread of one of the weakest boss fights in Resident Evil 3 Remake. You fight a nemesis, popping its oversized pimples in almost the exact same way we did just a few years ago. Or in my case, a few weeks ago, because I literally just recently played it for the first time. It's largely disappointing, much like the villains who I feel kinda got the short end of the stick due to the game's shorter runtime. Zeno, one of the cooler new characters, is gone before you know it, and Victor turns into a disappointing nemesis by the end. Can you begin to see why this game is difficult to talk about? Resident Evil Requiem is one of the most ambitious games the series has ever attempted. It takes a lot of risks, it experiments with a ton of new ideas, it gives Leon the most complete character arc any Resident Evil character has ever gotten, and it introduces Grace, one of the best new characters in the Resident Evil universe. Some of Requiem's ideas work beautifully, some of them only work the first time you experience them, and some of them miss the mark entirely. Resident Evil Requiem is perfect, then it isn't, and then it is again. It's a convoluted, fantastic, frustrating, exciting mess, and sometimes it's even a masterpiece. I think my initial conclusion still rings true. Resident Evil Requiem is a lot. If you enjoyed this video, you should watch one of my many other Resident Evil videos right here, and consider leaving a like as it really does help me. And I'll see you in the next investigation. Thank you for watching.